The United Nations is not the friend of the state of Israel. The United Nations is not the friend of Israelis. The United Nations is not the friend of the Jews. It is also not the friend of Africans. We as IBSI have written about how the anti-Semitic stance taken by the United Nations actually hurts Africans. And in this instance, it also hurts African women.
The UN is deeply corrupt, period. We talked about that. Kofi Annan, the former UN Secretary General of blessed memory, he spoke to this, and he wasn't even necessarily, he wasn't considered a Zionist. He wasn't a strong Israel. He said some things even against Israel, but he even took notice that, wow, you guys, we talk about Israel quite a bit in these hearings. Like,
yeah,
what about Sudan? What about what's going on in the Congo? What about what about the rest of the world?
Like, we can start all the way from, at least in this context, 2001, where we had the BDS conference in South Africa, Durban, South Africa. We've actually spoken about it on this forum as well, where this conference was held to actually discuss how they were going to deal with xenophobia, how they were going to deal with various forms of racism, which are real issues impacting many nations across the world and impacting Africa. Xenophobia, unfortunately, is still an issue. But instead of addressing that, which would help the millions and the billions of people on the African continent, Israel then became a factor. And then the whole lie in relation to Israel being an apartheid state and how that was then later adopted by BDS and how now it has fueled much of the anti-Semitism that we're seeing came about. And because then we find people that are quote unquote protesting and marching in the streets underneath the banner of Israel is all of that, the real issues pertaining to Africans, nobody cares about, right? It is not Africa that has a standing agenda item either at the General Assembly or even at the Human Rights Commission. It's not Africa. It's not African issues that have been taken up and where a real commission of inquiry has been formed to investigate the horrors that are done. We can unfortunately look at many, many examples, whether we're talking about the genocide in Nigeria, we're talking about terrorism that may be taking place across the continent, we're talking about slavery, including the slavery of women. There's no commission of inquiry that's going into that, but there is a commission of inquiry that's looking into the supposed crimes that Israel is doing, including its very founding in 1948. And so when there are real issues and real matters that are impacting the lives of African men and women on the continent, those issues take second, I would even say third or maybe even fourth place to the lie in relation to Israel. And that is why I say to people that if you are really, really, really interested and concerned about human rights and specifically about Black human rights, you will want the United Nations, insofar as it pertains to Israel, to be shut down. You will want social justice warriors who only care about social issues when it comes to Israel to keep quiet. Because if they were consistent, they would be consistent on all issues.